The future will be determined in part by happenings that it is impossible to foresee. It will also be influenced by trends that are now existent and observable. Welcome to EOS Weekly. As we approach the end of 2018, we thought we'd use this week's episode to go through the top 10 trends to keep an eye on throughout 2019. Quick disclaimer that as we will be touching on price during this episode, none of this is meant as financial advice. What we're about to go over are only predictions based on our current observations, and none of these predictions are guaranteed to play out as we're about to describe. This video is solely for entertainment and education, and hopefully to spark some conversation as well. So, here are our top 10 trends for 2019, starting with number 1, the embracing of sister chains. In the spring of 2018, prior to the EOS.io codebase being ready to launch a live blockchain, there were concerns around whether multiple EOS chains were going to spin up simultaneously. The general consensus was that we didn't want this. We all wanted to have one main EOS chain that we could all look to as the quote-unquote real EOS blockchain. And in June, we got what we wanted. We got our one main EOS chain launched, which we now affectionately call the EOS mainnet. Then in July, about a month later, we get this announcement from Telos. A group of block producers were planning to launch a second EOS chain. And when this announcement came out, people weren't quite sure of what to make of it. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Should we be supportive of this or opposed to it? The community was sort of like a bunch of insecure teenagers looking around at one another trying to make up their own minds as to what they should think about Telos. A good part of the EOS community was vocally opposed to any other chains spinning up outside the EOS mainnet. You could see this in the Telegram chats. Telos BPs were being shunned out of conversations. There must have been a concern among the block producers back in the late summer that if you ventured into the Telos vicinity, that you risked being ostracized from the wider EOS community. The sentiment on this has changed and is still in the process of changing. You can see more and more support for these sister chains like Telos and Warbly. There are still prominent members of the EOS community who maintain this one-chain-only mindset, but the acceptance and embracing of sister chains has undoubtedly changed. The vision of having a wide variety of EOS chains, where we can run experiments on individual chains and share what's working to the other chains, is gaining more and more of a widespread acceptance. So, our first prediction for 2019 is that this trend towards the acceptance of sister chains will continue and will only grow stronger throughout the year. And with it, the number of new EOS chains spinning up will grow as well. Let's move on to number 2. Voting with your feet. If you think of the EOS community as having these 3 main personas, dapps, BPs, and investors. When we say voting with your feet will be a trend in 2019, all that we mean by this is that you'll start to see all 3 of these shifting among the EOS.io chains based on which chain they like the best, or which chain best fits their needs. You're already seeing this with BPs. BPs typically have a set of values that they promote and try to adhere to. And based on those values, they make decisions as to what EOS blockchains they want to be associated with. Cypherglass, so far, has been an EOS mainnet only type of block producer, and has not gotten involved with Warbly nor Telos. EOS New York is a BP on both the EOS mainnet and on Warbly, but has not expressed much interest in Telos yet. Then you've got BPs like EOS Detroit and EOS Metal, both of which are on all 3 chains, Warbly, the EOS mainnet, and Telos. BPs have not been shy about telling the community why they have chosen to be on certain chains and not be on other chains. They're open about it. It's a defining characteristic of the BPs. So BPs are already voting with their feet. But the trend you'll see in 2019 is that investors will come next. In 2019, it's going to be dead simple for investors to exchange some of their EOS tokens for Telos tokens, Telos for Warbly, and so on. Investors will be shifting their portfolios to align with the chains and dapps that they like the most, the ones where they see the best chance for success. dapps are a bit tougher to move around at the moment, but dapps will still vote with their feet through the initial selection of which EOS.io chain they choose to launch on. But for the time being, once they do launch on one of them, it'll be non-trivial for dapps to migrate to another chain. But over time, this will get easier. Tools will be created to facilitate the migration of dapps across chains. Consulting services will rise up with specialists who know how to do this. And when these things get into place, you'll start to see more fluidity of dapps transitioning across chains. Number 3, BP Revenue Diversification. BPs are gaining invaluable experience right now, especially if they've been involved with launching one of the EOS.io chains, or if they were involved in making code enhancements to the EOS.io codebase. As the world learns more and more about what EOS is and what it is capable of, there's going to be a demand for people with experience in launching these chains. There's going to be a demand for consultative services in launching private EOS.io chains, often customized to meet a specific business case. And the BPs that launched the EOS mainnet, Warbly, and Telos, or even if they were involved with launching a testnet, these BPs are in the perfect spot to capitalize on this demand for private chains. As most of us are aware by now, this crypto bear market has made it unprofitable to run a BP node if their sole source of revenue is the token rewards. Dan Larimer's stance on the matter is that BPs should have alternative sources of income. And based on this poll we ran on Twitter, the community does not have the appetite right now for a dynamic BP payment model like what we suggested a few weeks ago. Of course, this is on Twitter, so this doesn't necessarily represent the EOS token holders, but our Twitter followers are likely a good cross-section of the community, so this does give you some idea of how people feel about the matter. In 2019, you're going to see BPs running for-profit consultative services. They'll help corporations spin up private chains or help direct them to the best EOS.io public chain when it makes sense to do so. And down the road, as a large variety of sister chains start popping up all over the place, there will also be a market for helping dapps migrate across chains. This may become a simple procedure in the years ahead, but even when we get to that point, this will be such an important thing to get right that people will want to hire specialists to oversee the process. Again, the BPs are in the perfect position to offer services like this as well. Yves from EOS Nation made an excellent point on this first episode of EOS Radio. He talked about how some BPs may also go and become dApp builders. With the $4 billion war chest that Block 1 has, why not identify a need in the ecosystem and get some of that VC funding and go and build that idea? Once again, BPs are in the perfect spot to capitalize on their technical expertise, their viewpoint, and their name recognition. Moving on to number 4. The decriminalization of vote buying. Going off our last point, that BPs are expected to and positioned to diversify their revenue streams. What makes this a bit messy is the rule against vote buying, which you can see here in the current version of the Constitution. Once the BPs are for-profit, diversified entities, doing business deals with token holders across the ecosystem on a daily basis, it's going to become impossible to police the vote buying if it isn't already. People are naturally going to choose to work with BPs who speak their native language and share their values. Disentangling the business dealings of BPs with the token holders they represent and trying to decipher the reasoning behind different voting patterns is impractical and dangerous. There's also the issue of BPs like EOS DAC, which is a decentralized BP that enables token holders to profit from the success of this BP. We should be encouraging this type of thing, not discouraging it. If the plan is that we are not going to keep BPs on a holier-than-thou type of plane, if the expectation is that BPs are going to have to get their hands dirty in the business world, we're going to have to take the handcuffs off. Having this murky, gray vote-buying rule brings too much confusion and uncertainty to the business place. And throughout 2019, the EOS community is going to come to grips with this reality. It's even possible that some chains will fully embrace the vote-buying concepts and see it as a positive thing, as an entrepreneurial part of a free market blockchain. Number 5. More of an emphasis on immutability. In 2019, we're going to start playing to our strengths better. And EOS's greatest strengths are its speed, scalability, and feeless transactions. One of the main things that has caused a bit of a backlash in 2018 and brought the FUD to EOS has been concerns around immutability. In general, people in the wider crypto community value individual responsibility, and in their blockchains, this equates to people valuing immutability. When they hear about BPs going in and policing the system, freezing accounts, changing keys, whatever, it makes EOS a target for criticism. Now that being said, the crypto community is not our target customer for these EOS chains. Our target customers are businesses, and specifically dApp builders. And some types of businesses will want that safeguard of having BPs with special powers who can go in and tweak things when something goes awry. Again, we see the advantage of growing out a variety of chains, in that we can experiment with different levels of BP interference. But as a whole, looking across the spectrum of EOS.io chains, the prediction here is that you will see a general movement towards immutability. On the mainnet, this will mean a lessening of ECAF's powers. But we will also likely see chains spin up where the BP power itself is more limited, where the code that enables BPs to go in and mess around with accounts is completely removed. Number 6. The decoupling of the EOS token price with Bitcoin. We've all seen, especially over the last few months, that the EOS price moves up and down in pretty close correlation with Bitcoin and the wider crypto market. And in the Telegram chats, there have been a lot of people asking why this was. Why has EOS not broken away? Why is it susceptible to the same bear and bull markets as the rest of crypto? Well, right now, the majority of EOS token holders are investors. By a long shot, this is true. You can see this by looking at the top whale accounts. They're all exchanges. And you can't build anything on EOS when you're holding your tokens on an exchange. So these are investors here, not dApp builders. But what's going to start happening in 2019 is that more and more dApps are going to come in and buy those tokens from the investors. And the needle is going to start moving noticeably towards the dApps. The dApp slice of the pie will grow while the investor slice will shrink. And as this happens, the EOS price is going to start to decouple from the Bitcoin price. The other benefit this has is it makes BP elections more healthy, less prone to corruption. dApp builders need their EOS tokens to operate their business. They're not going to buy and sell based on what Bitcoin is doing. It's the investors who are currently increasing or decreasing their exposure to the entire crypto space at the same time that is causing this correlation. Breaking away entirely from the Bitcoin price correlation will likely take years. But in 2019, the trend will be towards more dApp builders over investors, and this means a trend towards the decoupling of Bitcoin and EOS prices. Number 7. The ease of dApp building. One of the things that's going to help attract developers in to build on EOS blockchains is by making it easier to build on them. Right now, it can be a bit intimidating. Things are pretty raw right now. dApp builders have to work with raw blockchain interactions. They have to figure out how much RAM, CPU, and net they're going to need, and then they have to procure those resources with tokens. And how do you go about coding and deploying a dApp that utilizes an EOS blockchain? This is all very new, and it's not very easy yet. Contrast the current state of EOS with something like Amazon Web Services, AWS. In AWS, they manage the server farm for you. They can spin up new virtual machines as needed based on traffic. And AWS provides email services, storage, identity, and permissions management. You name it. It's a one-stop shop for all your application's backend needs. The trend in 2019 is going to be for EOS dApp building to move in this direction, where the complexity of dApp development is going to start being abstracted away. This won't be mandatory or anything. The raw blockchain will always be there for those who know what they're doing, for the dApps that want to build directly on top of the base protocol layer. But for those who are okay with being slightly abstracted away from the raw blockchain for the sake of ease of development, the application protocol layer will begin to be fleshed out throughout 2019, and most dApps will prefer to build on top of it for the sake of ease of use. It will also be less error-prone to build on these established protocols. All we're talking about here are things like Lumios, EOS Factory, and Scatter. New players are going to be popping up here, further fleshing out the application protocol layer throughout 2019. Block 1 may even be one of them. We'll see. Moving on to number 8. From games to social networks. As we all know, games have dominated the early stage of EOS. Games, including gambling dApps as the biggest subcategory, have taken the majority of the top spots on dApp radar here. And games aren't going anywhere. Throughout 2019, they'll continue to occupy some of the top spots in terms of activity and value transfer. But the next major sector that we're going to hear more and more about in 2019 is going to be social networks. 2019 will be the year that we start to get EOS versions of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. People are becoming increasingly aware of the privacy violations and censorship that's taking place on these existing networks. And content creators are already starting to look for alternatives. EOS is coming at the perfect time for this. It is the perfect platform for building the next generation of social networking systems. It will help solve both the privacy and censorship issues, and has the added benefit of enabling content creators to earn revenue tokens for contributing content. The killer EOS app of 2019 is going to be a YouTube alternative, a censorship-resistant, tokenized version of YouTube. The other good thing about social networks is that they are low risk. EOS is still new, and we probably don't want to move air traffic control systems onto EOS just yet. Social networks are, for the most part, not life or death types of systems. So after games, they are a safe next step in terms of market expansion. Plus, there are some overlaps with games and social networks, like the area of virtual reality, which is sort of in between the two. So again, social networks make sense as the logical next step for dapps. Number 9. Block 1 formalized product launches. In terms of secrecy, we can already see that Block 1 is taking an Apple-like approach on the product development side of things. They'll drop little hints here and there so as to build up anticipation and hype. But they are not releasing early half-baked versions of their products. They're waiting. They're waiting and they're polishing their products up. And our prediction here is that you're going to start seeing Block 1 doing some grand unveilings for their product launches in a public forum of some kind. Keep in mind that we haven't seen an actual Block 1 product launch yet. Yes, Block 1 did build the open source EOS.io blockchain software, and they continue to enhance it. But the EOS mainnet was a decentralized community launch. Block 1 had to be hands-off in the launching of the chain for decentralization purposes, and for liability purposes as well. So the launch of the EOS mainnet should not be seen as indicative for how future Block 1 product launches will go. Block 1 has a large and growing team of engineers, over 100 developers, and they're hiring another 2 every week. And we don't know much of anything yet about what all they're building. They've kept it under tight wraps. But when the time comes, expect to see a grand stage, likely with Brendan Bloomer and Dan Larimer together on it. They'll make it their own, but it will resemble and be modeled after Steve Jobs. Also, expect to see the Bytemaster being more careful with what he reveals in Telegram chats. He'll still drop hints here and there, but from now on, the hints he drops will be a bit more rehearsed and fit into a planned out drip marketing campaign coordinated by Block 1. And that brings us to number 10. Delays of IBC. Not to end on a down note, but throughout 2019, IBC, which stands for Inter-Blockchain Communication, is going to keep seeming like it's just out of reach. We'll get there, we will get there, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, we'll have things like Bancor X, which will hopefully add support for the sister chains, enabling us to exchange tokens across the entire EOS ecosystem while we plan out the longer-term solution, the true blockchain-to-blockchain protocol. Who will be involved with developing and standardizing the IBC protocol is unknown. Block 1 has mentioned it as something on their roadmap, but we don't know how much effort they're planning to put towards it. Because of IBC's importance to the health and resilience of the EOS ecosystem, it is likely that some faction of the community will organize around an IBC initiative if Block 1 is moving too slowly. Block producers that have a presence across all 3 chains, like EOS Detroit and EOS Metal, might be in an ideal spot to participate and potentially lead such an initiative. But 2019 is going to be a frustrating year if we have too high of expectations for when a tangible implementation of IBC will arrive. We need to realize that it might not be until late 2019 or even until 2020 when we have the first version of base layer IBC, meaning the true blockchain-to-blockchain IBC. That's it for our list of trends. This video is meant to help give you a set of things to watch for in 2019. Please keep in mind that these are just predictions, and who knows, maybe we'll be way off on some of these. What do you think? Anything we're off on here? Any major areas we missed where you have your own predictions? Please add your comments below. This could be a good one to get a conversation going. That's it for this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. We'll help you stay current on EOS as this revolution unfolds. Thanks, and we'll see you next week right here on EOS Weekly.